Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all. Thanks for joining us today. I'm coming at you live from the mothership, as you guys can see. This week, we've got a couple special guests. I've got a new co-host, Mr. Ollie Morris. How are you, sir?
Very well, thank you, Gabe. How are you? I've
I
tried
think
to match your background with my lights, so almost there.
Yeah, we got a whole vibe going on. It's good. It's good. I was just thinking, for those of you who have seen or heard some of our LinkedIn audios and previous events, I was always complaining about not having music to play in. So I'm liking the new vibe with the countdown and stuff. It's a good start. Gets me in the mood. It sounds very, very cool. Ollie, thank you for joining us. Our usual co-host, your friend and mine, Mr. Micah Smith, I think is on a plane right now.
Living that jet-setting lifestyle that he is.
He's like Robert Downey Jr. or something. He's just like, he's like Iron Man. But some of our viewers today likely have seen you recently doing the Doc Auto training camp, maybe, and some of the other content you're producing, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been doing a lot in terms of AI and how we as an organization are pushing the boundaries. So it's a natural follow-on with a guest who'll be joining us shortly to go even more in depth about just what can be done with AI. So yeah, super excited. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to your point, this idea of I think I put it in my social post about breaking, the titles you sort of breaking through busting the hype bubble. One of my favorite artists, because I'm of a certain vintage, Public Enemy said, "Don't believe the hype." In this case, I think the hype is real. It's just how do you put it into action, right? I mean, many of us are doing it and realizing the benefits. But to help us explore that a little bit more, you've likely seen her on a few of my interviews, and probably you recently saw her on the cover of CIO Views, recently named one of the top 10 most influential women in 2024 on CI Views magazine. By the way, get the print version because there is a shot of me in there. I'm still trying to figure out the royalties, but no, it's not about.
You'd weave that in.
This is about our friend Marisa Kokenauer from Cognizant. Let's bring her in, Jorge. There she is.
Hi, everybody.
Cover girl. Not only did you get named to the top 10 list, you got the cover, which is amazing.
I was really excited when they asked me to move to the cover after they read my article. So I'm thrilled. There's wonderful. If you get a chance, everyone read it. There's such fabulous ladies I had the honor to be a part of in this list. And truly, CIO Views did a really nice job too, pulling it together and getting this out there. So I'm really excited about it. And of course, also excited, Gabe, that one of the pictures of you and I made it in.
It's a great shot. One of those super fun. I always truly enjoy getting the opportunity to chat with you. I know you're very busy, obviously getting named to lists and doing cover shoots and stuff like that. So we appreciate your time.
Thank you. Glad to be here today.
Yeah, for sure. So Marisa, just since we last spoke, you and I were chatting and we're like, hey, you know what? Let's do a live stream because there's this thing that we keep hearing and you keep seeing, first of all, let's remind the audience your role at Cognizant and some of the things you're working on and seeing and hearing and doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those that I haven't met before, my name is Marisa Kokenauer. I head up our advisory, North America delivery, and mindshare for the intelligent automation practice in our intuitive operations and automation business. So lots of words there, but really what we do is we help to be able to help clients think end-to-end. How do you drive digital transformation in your organization? How do you adopt these tools? How do you make them meaningful, impactful? And truthfully, how do you shift the way you work? To use these because they really are going to change the game on how do we get the job done every day. It's going to create new roles out there too. And I think it's all about how do you move past maybe just hype, but making this the reality that really is the potential for us.
I think that's interesting because I think in some of the pre-event conversations we had, and Ollie joined as well. And this is like a part of the core of Pathfinder. This is something that in some ways we talked about, and people have heard me say this before, I think good, sound business practices will always be good, sound business practices, no matter what, no matter the technology, no matter the era. And what we were talking about was one of the core things for success is, and I remember hearing this when I first started here in computer, this concept of don't automate a bad process. Like, forget if it's AI automation, agentic automation, or RPA, or anything in between. If you're trying to automate a bad process, like, there's only so much gain you can actually get, right? And what we're talking about here, this idea of the sort of generational shift, right? So we had traditional RPA and automation when we created that category, basically. Tremendous lift relative to the time in what was happening, right? To this day, foundationally, traditional automation core, and it's really core to unlocking the agentic process automation side, right? Just having AI agents in and of itself is like sort of having like a singular little desktop app. I'm oversimplifying it a little bit, but there's a lot that it can't do. But my point is, no matter how powerful the process is, or sorry, the technologies are combined, if it's a bad process, there's only so much you can do. Give me your guys' thoughts on that.
Do you want to go first? Do you want me to jump in?
After you, Marisa.
Sure. So, I think one of the things that we have to realize is that, it's about not automating a bad process, but also in general, we have to really think about, not just how do you deploy this technology. It's very easy to go out and do a POC and go test and try some of this technology. But it's the same thing when we talked about years ago when we started on a lot of these conversations. You do have to stop and think, how does work get done differently? Where do we have to rethink how we're going to do this work? Some of it may be fully taken over by technology. Probably should have. We know a lot of the reasons we had even RPA back in the day was there was gaps between the different systems that weren't integrated. Some of it was also just, companies grow by acquisition, and it's hard to ingest. It's hard to create those seamless processes. So that's one of the key things that I would say we have to remember. I think the other is, though, as you go through this, there's still a lot of these debts. And actually, I was just at a big HFS event last week, and they talked about these debts that we have on why we're not seeing these impact and value that we should or we want to get out of these technologies. Number one is still cultural. And we know that's a big one. We know that, that's one of the ones we have to go after if we really want to reap the benefits and drive adoption across the processes and with our people. The second was technical debt. I think that's increasing a bit also because there's a lot of stuff to use out there and everyone's ingesting so much of it. So we've seen a lot more conversations also where clients are saying, look, we have a lot of tools and technology. Can we take a look at these and see, is this what we need, not only for today, but truthfully the ones we need also to move us forward? So that's a second conversation. And then you saw other things there like skills, process coming up, and a big one is data. So I think a lot of those are going to sound very familiar to anyone that's been in this industry for a while. And I think the shift on taking the time to address some of these challenges is going to be really key if we want to get bigger value, bigger ROI, and that shift also on the many other things that you get is speed, quality, cultural impact, employee empowerment, all those other metrics.
And Ollie, talk to me, because I know like we just did the document automation training camp. Agentic or AI agent training camps coming up. It's going to be super exciting. But, those are the things we sort of broadcast in public, but behind the scenes, quote unquote, behind the scenes, day to day, the community team, you guys are doing a lot. The whole company is doing a lot to help people overcome these things. So talk to me about some of the practical ways to create that culture, to create this sort of foundational elements or reinforce the foundational elements to address technical debt or skill debt, whatever those debts are.
I also wanted a couple of points Marisa made, which were awesome as well, whereby we've got customers who have delivered millions, perhaps even hundreds of millions from RPA and automation in general, which is phenomenal. But they're going to be coming under pressure, and I know a lot of my former customers are from their C-suite to say, we now need to think about how we can use AI, right? We're getting pressure from our shareholders that we should be trying to find our niche and become more productive. So we need to go and start doing some of this stuff. And with automation, maybe you've gone as far as doing document automation, but you've had it relatively structured, maybe semi-structured data, but you're going to find really quickly that you'll be moving into a territory whereby the quality of your data will completely dictate how much you can deliver from a value perspective from all of this agentic automation. So not that I can sort of reveal too much, but a lot of the things that we as a team are working on in terms of putting, say, a frameworks together that you can leverage, which we'll be touching on in Pathfinder Summit, hashtag shameless plug, January the 21st, the 23rd.
You're a natural.
Slip it in there when I can. We'll be covering a lot of things like that, which can enable you to just kind of get the most out of it. And then, of course, there's our amazing product team who are working on some super awesome stuff as we speak. So yeah, it can feel like maybe you're taking your first kind of tentative steps like we were almost 10 years ago with RPA, with agentic process automation, but we've got a lot of stuff in the pipeline that we'll be covering in Pathfinder Summit and training camps beyond that, which will help massively.
So you guys touched on a couple things. You touched, we keep hearing about data. We talked a little bit about processes. Marisa, you work with a lot of the world's biggest clients, our biggest customers or companies. All of those things, I guess, are true. Where are those that are being successful starting? What kind of processes are they applying agentic process automation to? How are they managing data so they can get out of POC jail? What are some of the best practices there? What are some of the learnings you can bring back and share with the team here or with the audience here?
Sure. I would say a couple key things come to mind. I think the first is when their strategy is being enabled by these tools, not the strategy is to just use these tools. So I think that's a big key one. And we have leadership sitting down thinking about how do I use agentic? How do I even use Gen AI, other automation? How do I just do digital transformation? And then they're talking about it based on the goals and objectives of their company and how this can be enabled. That's a game changer. And I do think we need to elevate some of the conversations to be able to make sure that we are tying to the big impact areas. And then the second is going to actually be the kind of the opposite end of the spectrum is where they are thinking about how do they deploy this across their organization. You continue to see whether it was with automation, it really accelerated with Gen AI, and we continue to see even this agentic conversation on how can people touch and use these tools. And those that are taking the time to actually shift the culture, train their people, use things like Ollie was mentioning around the trainings that are out there to be able to pick up and leverage these tools, that's making all the difference. And we are seeing it's not even just a 3 to 5-fold return, which is what actually some of the stats used to say for mature enterprises using these tools. We are seeing just magnitudes. I am not even kidding. Some are getting over 100-fold return on their investments because they took that journey. Now, to be realistic, the next piece is plan for it. This is not something that's going to happen in 3 months, that you're going to have this massive impact ROI. Everyone's using agentic AI, pick your tool or poison. It is a plan. It's something you have to go after. You need to plan. How do you move past the POCs? How do you invest in the organization to do this? And it will take some investment to be able to get this over the line, to be able to reap the benefits. But, I've seen and even heard CFOs stand up on stages and actually talk about the fact that they see it not only in their numbers, but they see it across all of their metrics in the organization that they track, whether it's from clients, whether it's from a safety and quality score, obviously finance, but also in HR numbers and the way employees are engaging. I think those are 3 really key areas to consider on how to make the shift and to get past just the POCs, the dabbling, hey, I got some nice outcomes, a cool couple solutions to we're working different. We're beating our competitors. Our unit price is coming down. Like whatever your key metric is for an organization you track, when you see and feel it, now you know that you're really taking advantage of what's out there.
That's an interesting point and a great segue to my my next question or topic, which is showing the value. I feel like again, what it said at the top in terms of good business practices, always good business practices. But something you mentioned also is this idea of step level impact, meaning it's not incremental or even doubling, 2x, 3x. It's 10x. It's truly like we've talked about 10xers for years, and there's all kinds of books and stuff about 10xing, right? But it's truly that's actually attainable. Like that's actually not just attainable; it's happening, and it's super exciting. Like said before in our show, the stuff we're doing internally has saved literally 10x. And it's,
Mhm.
and the other interesting thing you brought up is it's not just the hourly cost. It's not just like sort of the productivity. It's the vibe is the way I would put it. Like our
Mhm.
people feel empowered, and like there's a cool factor to be able to like figure it. Like you don't have to know everything about it, but be able to use it and implement it into your workflow. There's a lot of things. But when we're talking about this value proposition and showing the value proposition, showing the value proposition and documenting it, are there new metrics to be tracked? Are they the same metrics? How are we, what are the best ways to show the value of this? Because I feel like with defined goals, defined metrics, it's going to help you move out of POC jail, right? Because you can prove that you're making the progress and showing this exponential growth. But Ollie, let me ask you this. Because we just published a paper actually on metrics that matter, basically with Pathfinder Group. But how has that changed, or has it?
I mean, the metrics haven't changed in the sense that you're still automating business processes, so the domains of finance, operations, and kind of organization will effectively be the same. But I think organizations will have to think a little bit beyond how many automations have we delivered and how many hours have we saved. And I think this is where actually telling the full story becomes really, really important. I think we can talk about how, maybe we saved $500,000 through this automation, but that's almost not really enough anymore, because inevitably if you dig deeper into that, maybe you saved $500,000 because you brought accounts payable back in-house, so you've reduced your reliance on outsourcing. So maybe that's shortened your debtor days to 30 or whatever a good debtor days number is, I don't know, improved your cash flow by millions, you've reduced error payments by 99%, so your cost of error has now gone down, internal audit teams are closing audits 75% faster. That is a story is just way more compelling, and depending on who you tell that story to will invoke a completely different reaction. The CFO is going to hear it and think, crikey, maybe we should be looking at insourcing more of our contracts, and the coup might be sat there thinking, well, this reduction in errors is going to improve quality and address the other operational concerns we've got, and the head of compliance is going to be thinking, wow, we can do so much more audits with sort of same resources that we've got now. And that was kind of the essence of what Micah and Mark Goodare were talking about at Imagine with our automation metrics framework, really, which there's a whole host of things that people should be capturing, but they're most likely not. At least from my experience from being in our customer success team, I know they're not. They're sort of thinking of, let's just capture that maybe a bot runs and that we've got a bot live, but they're not going that extra layer deeper. And I think this is what opens things up even more. And I always go back to Petrobras's use case at Imagine. So the biggest energy supplier in South America and Brazil, who are using our technology. And I think they're at, it's like $1 billion, Gabe, or something like that a year that they're saving from all of this. And that's by simply looking at all of their tax returns. So they're looking at something which is completely replicable across any geography. Everyone's paying taxes. Every big company's paying taxes. They're using generative AI, cutting edge technology combined with us to just improve and speed up how they're doing all of those returns and cutting errors.
I think there's a couple stories that come to mind. So there's one of our U.S. banking companies had to process loans faster, or they were at risk of potentially losing business from an automaker. And so I think that this helps maybe encapsulate the idea of like, okay, well, we got to press this, so their metrics could have been like sort of straight through processing on loans and error rates on loan processing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But instead, the actual metric was we saved, the business by fixing these things, by automating these things, which resulted in, $1 billion in revenue because we didn't lose the business, or because we were able, not only did we not lose it, we fixed it and we became a provider of choice for this automaker, right? Another one I just saw is actually posted on the gram. Shout out to our social team. It's an interview I did up at Imagine in Austin, and our customer said they were about to face fines because they couldn't sort of deliver their SLAs or deliver to their SLAs, and it was going to cost a ton of money. And so again, it was like, we have to fix this process, this process, this process. And they could have said, okay, our AHT went down and our X went down. Those are, to me, those are the KPIs, but the goal and the outcomes are, we didn't get fined $100 million or something. You think about the recent news about AML and $3 billion fine, right? Like if you're in the AML space and or you're in finance in a financial, environment, and you're using automation for AML processes, it's not sort of straight through processing rates and error rates and stuff like that. It's like, well, it protected us from $3 billion in fines, right? And brand equity and these kinds of things. But Marisa, more specifically, like you talked about some of the almost cultural pieces. Are there any metrics there that you're seeing or advising your customers to start documenting and tracking?
Yeah, I think one thing before I jump into that is my big tip to everyone out there is track your metrics. Start now. If for some reason you just said, oh, I don't want to do it when you got started, I promise you will regret it later. You always have to go back. You always have to try to get the numbers. And it is never easy to go backwards to get that information. So that would be my quick tip before I dive in, because I don't want to forget that one. And then, I think to the point Ollie was making, tie to your business metrics. At the end of the day, everything we're doing here is about driving business outcomes. So you need to tie it in. You actually could use a lot of these tools and technologies to actually tag. You can actually do this the whole way back to the RPA tools if you want to. You can actually, everything that's being automated or touched with Gen AI or any of these technologies actually actually tag it that way. So when you run the data, just as you would run it to see which employee did work, because everything gets logged when you're doing like an account reconciliation or journal entry or doing payroll, whatever it may be. There's normally a system of record on who did what. You could actually create those IDs, and then you could show more objectively business outcomes, because it's also kind of painful sometimes to be able to do the before and afters if you're having to do some of this manually in these processes. But to your point too, Gabe, a couple of things when you get started, this may sound a little bit of like a soft metric, but start with also participation metrics. Get people involved. And it's okay if not everyone wants to be building and developing and using these tools in the future, but everyone could be involved in using these tools in the future. We actually have some folks where we run competitions like gamification or hackathons. We don't always do the highest impact as number one. Sometimes it's also how many teams did you get involved? How many people were in your team, and what kind of impact did you do across business units, for example? And the reason is that most processes are not linear. They do have some touch across the functional lines, and you want that impact. So think about some of those metrics. I'll even give you, this is a long time ago when I got into Lean. I had a productivity metric that I had to get back in my GE days. And the metric I actually used with the team was everyone had to do at least one Kaizen. So basically one project essentially each quarter. I hit my productivity metric very easily. Actually, I beat it multifold because people just naturally, some would do something really simple like reorganize their desk, which is technically a Kaizen. Others had a lot of things they wanted to go do and make the team better, or the way that we did work better. And they were fabulous ideas that we wouldn't have got any other way. So I think sometimes you have to be careful that when you talk to folks, you have to relate to them and what matters. And I do find if you do what's right for your customer and the organization, it's funny how a lot of times all the metrics tend to start also working themselves out, and you tend to hit your numbers. So that would be some of my advice and tips on it, from especially a cultural aspect too, Gabe.
That's great advice. I love this idea of, I guess I'm oversimplifying by saying thinking outside the box, but I think there's some aspect too of, like we mentioned, like good business practices are good business practices, but at the same time, the exponential gains that can be realized also invite and maybe necessitate this idea of rethinking the whole thing, like reimagining what's possible. We have a slogan that we've used and say, and it resonates, which is automate the impossible. And you can actually, I've literally automated what I thought was impossible now that we have agentic process automation. I was like, there's no way we could do that because it would be X, Y, and Z, blah, blah, blah. All of a sudden I was like, you know what, maybe we could, let's try it. Right. And it's obviously I drink the Kool-Aid, but it's so exciting. It's so exciting to see the benefit. And again, kind of to your point, to see the people's reactions it's hard to explain. It's actually hard to quantify, but since we're talking about it, I like where your head's at.
The other thing I would add there too is to your point on try it. I get this doesn't work everywhere. And I actually heard someone even say, like, be careful, make sure you really understand the whole fail fast motto, because depending where you're at and what kind of role you're in, it may not be the outcome you want if you fail fast. So be careful with that. But at the same time, we do need more of a culture of try it, see what happens. If it doesn't work, another way to also just truly build trust and mean it is, if it doesn't work, you don't have to keep doing it that way. So for some reason, when you automate it, it's not giving you the outcome you wanted, whatever the reason. I don't know. I mean, most of the time it tends to work really well. But, I think if you're honest with people and say, look, if it doesn't work, it doesn't make it better, it causes a problem somewhere, we don't have to do this, but let's at least try it and see what happens and give it a very fair chance, because you will find most of the time it makes things better and it's going to free up other opportunities. And especially it's about creating a lot of buy-in to what we're doing here. It is really, it's hard for people, right? Any one of us, if you ask us to do something different than how we do it every day and we're used to and we're comfortable, I don't care if you're a change leader or you're someone working in a field, like delivering power utility or on a shop floor building a locomotive, which is how I started my career. You're going to bulk at it, right? It's human nature to say, well, it works, right? So I think that element of, how do I try it? How do I give people a fair chance at it and actually listen to them if they have any concerns along the way? I've always seen a positive shift when you do it that way, and just be cognizant of the fact that it is hard for all of us.
Shameless plug, everybody. Shameless plug.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well done. Let's see. We've got, looks like we've got a question popped up. Thank you, Devendra. POC cannot address the two main challenges in actually implementing the AI automation: data quality and production, and lack of metrics KPI to prove the value. POC is not addressing those two things.
Spot on. Yeah, spot on. I used to say to some of my customers, what technological concept are you trying to prove? And a lot of the time they're like, actually, we're not really trying to prove anything because we know the technology works. In fact, the previous company I came from has done it. So it would actually probably be more about, we just want to be sure that before we make this investment, we're going to get somewhere close. I mean, 10x, maybe not, but we just want to know there's going to be some element of return. So that whole value proof is probably what they're looking to get an answer for. And to that end, we can provide them with all of the case studies in the world and work with them to build that business case. But I also want to go back to your point, Gabe, around how automating the impossible. When I used to run process discovery workshops in our professional services team, I'd often start off with a whole host of caveats around what it can and it cannot do. If I was to do those tomorrow, I'd almost say the limiting factor will be your imagination, audience. It's really down to you to think about what couldn't be automated, because that's just where we're at. So it's huge, and I don't think a POC I think will just fundamentally limit your thoughts in terms of what can be gotten at, and potentially take away from, as Devendra says, the two most important things, which is implementing it. So just try it, get on and do it.
So it sounds like to your point, so there's a couple things, right? Of course, we all work in B2B and enterprise, and it's, can be lethargic and monolithic and all these kinds of things. And again, underlying all of that is that these are tried and true practices that have worked and whatnot. I think the thinking though, and maybe what I'm hearing is within the context of these traditional things, see where you can maybe push the edges and rethink within those frameworks how to think bigger, how to open up a little bit, because clearly you can't just sort of rip and replace and just unthink everything. Although I would love to be able to do that. There's maybe a few skunk works functions or something like that maybe that you can do. You have the freedom to do some of those things, but I think there is a mindset And I think like when I talk to, maybe when you talk to business users and you're an automation lead, and I've talked to some of our customers that are COA leads, automation program leads, et cetera, and the way that they sort of engage that business user and explain the art of the possible, the art of the impossible, gets that business user super fired up. There's a story I remember when I first started, and we went and did a build-a-bot session at the customer, like during a POC, and they had 3 use cases. And so we went and like took a few SEs and a few folks in, and there was like 5 people on the team, the automation team, what have you. Big, very famous customer of ours. And they invited a couple more people because like an idea came up, and they invited a couple more people. Within 48 hours, they had 37 use cases and automations built, right? It just exploded. So that's super exciting. And I think that's, again, part of what we can see here. Now, we can also talk about, though, with the models, with the sort of the technical concerns, what's going on in the black box, especially in highly regulated industries.
Mm-hmm.
Marisa, what are some of your like either banking or healthcare? How are your let's just call them more regulated industry clients approaching some of these challenges and some of these opportunities?
Yeah, one of the things I always think is interesting is we're always a little bit concerned on, how do we make sure we stay compliant, right? It was even with automation, people were worried about it. I do think we have a good, keen lens on how to control, how to make sure you test in the right environments. Like, for example, like you also put human in the loop last stage, so things aren't moving either to production or to a high risk approval or something like that. So you can put in the control points that you need, I think is one. Data is the biggest that I think that we need to really keep an eye out for, is also where do we ingest data from? Where is data moving to? How do we use it? Not only the quality challenge that we have to think about, but that is one in general that is also a risk factor, right? Especially when you get some of these technologies, they're very impactful if you can pull from multiple data sources. So we have to be thoughtful about that. And I think it's about putting the right guide rails in. Most people are trying to do the right thing. There's not too many bad actors out there. Obviously, there's one-offs everywhere that we have to keep an eye for and put controls in. But if you partner up with your security teams, you partner up with like SOX teams and organizations or regulatory folks, you can really think ahead on most of it. As I said, you could make controls in too if you just hold that last stage, right? So you're getting 99% of it, but that last piece, and you're doing that also to build confidence, because part of this is a lot of these tools you can actually blacklist, whitelist, you can put controls in place. There's a lot there actually and across the board on these tools. But I think the next piece is now how do we get comfortable with it? And then I do think something for future auditors is there's a way everyone audits today. And I was an auditor for a few years. So there's the way you go through guidelines and regulation. I have a suspicion that there's also going to be ways we need to think differently. It's probably a little bit of a segue here, but I would say I think that's why there's so much ripe opportunity also in that space for these different tools to be leveraged, because today you're so inundated if you do audit to get through all your financials, all of your controls. Like it's a lot to do, and it's very rare you have time to stop and think, what else could the exposure be? Because you're trying to make sure you check all the known exposure. I think the power of where we're getting to then is those individuals who know how to think about risk can sit down and actually get ahead, because we know there's bad actors out there, right? There's also cyber to consider. And how do you prevent some of those attacks? And I'd actually love to see these really, really smart people be redeployed to think about how do I protect the company and how do I protect against future risk? Because a lot of the known ones, you can actually build some of the controls around. So I think I probably gave you a little bit more, Gabe, than you asked for, but as I kept thinking of other impact in ways that in some ways the technology could also be used for good.
Well, I think you illustrated you started to illustrate, and then I'm sure there's even more, but just all of, how much there is, right? And I think it's a great tee up for Ollie. I need a little musical cue thing where I'm like, do shameless plug. How our platform is the best one suited just to solve for these things, specifically around governance and the security and the visibility, by being a single unified platform that's private cloud, public cloud, any model, all of the things kind of that you mentioned, Marisa, to set folks up for success?
I think the biggest thing that Marisa said was human in the loop, and something which we've had in the platform for a number of years in the form of automation copilot. But at the end of the day, and like Petrobras have done, you could end up having a model or an agentic process that ultimately outputs something which a human should be checking out, whether that is maybe because 30% of all transactions should be validated or checked by a human, or you're in the early stage of potentially parallel processing a new agentic process automation. Having that expert, that subject matter expert, that human in the loop will be key to building the confidence and giving transparency into just what's going on in that black box, which then potentially unlocks even more within the business. So I think being able to have that, and those of you who've done the document automation training camp will have experienced that through the validation process and the bot games challenge we ran as well, where you're automating completely unstructured contracts and leases and having to validate data. In the click of a button, you can sit there and validate, and that model can then learn and become better. But it's being trained off of that subject matter expert and what it can do. So I think being open, having that, and being transparent into the potential black box that LLMs can be is hugely important, and something which is, well, I cover in a 20-minute video on our university, unlocking everything end to end. So yeah, that is, I think that for me is the most important thing.
I think too, if I were just to add one little piece there, is that if you're trying to break this POC gridlock that might be in your organization, having a human in the loop is going to help build a lot of comfort for your leadership and your compliance teams, and maybe a little bit more nervous or in a process area that maybe is more highly regulated, like a GXP process in life sciences, for example. So I would also use that as a lever, because the big piece is how do you get past POC to production, because that's also where the value is going to be. Granted, there's a little more cost to consider, but your bigger value, right? So that would be, I think, also to what Ollie was giving an example, is another tip on how to get out of that gridlock and maybe get some folks a little more comfortable to take that leap with you.
I love that.
Yeah. Another thing I just want to say as well, quickly, Gabe, is I think a lot of people will find during testing, when you're testing out the output from the models, that's potentially where you'll be spending a little bit more time than, say, you would have done in the traditional automation space. Typically, you spend all the time building an automation, and when you're testing, you're just quickly making sure that when it's in production, it's sort of working as you expect. But this time, you'll be looking a little bit more at maybe the F1 score, or how well a model's kind of predicted labels match the actual labels, if, say, you're doing something around categorization. So essentially, depending on the outcome of that, you may need to tweak your prompts a little bit. And there is no one better to be doing that than the SMEs or the people who know this process off by heart. So getting them involved, and I guess this goes back to what Marisa said at the very, very start of this, which is kind of building that culture, but also taking these experts on the journey as well.
Yeah, and I think that's it just harkens back again to the just fundamentals, right? When people feel, I call it emotional equity. When you feel like you've earned emotional equity in your thing, everyone's sort of in it. It's not just, oh, it's Marisa's thing, so yeah, I'll give an opinion or something, but it's her thing. I don't, whatever. But if it's our thing, right, that's something else, which becomes really exciting. You guys touched on a few different of the common barriers, I guess I would say, that we're facing right now. Touched a little bit about how to overcome some of them. Are there any other, I guess, Marisa, if you had a short list of the three things, and we talked about a few of them, the data and the compliance security, are there, I guess everyone probably has a common short list, but in your mind, just to reiterate, what are sort of the common or the ways to overcome those things? And Ollie, I would ask you the same with the customers that you're talking to.
So I think if you're trying to overcome, I'm going to probably do two things. You're trying to overcome the gridlock POC to our theme, but also just overcome the challenges of getting this to scale. I think there's some similarities. I think we've talked through a lot of them, so I won't repeat, which is, definitely invest in the culture piece. And I give you examples on that is, let people get involved. I think skilling is a massive challenge. We see that all the time come out of surveys. It's to find enough folks who are skilled up on these tools is a challenge. And I think it's going to continue to be. And I think this is also an opportunity where, especially for anything that maybe is a little bit more straightforward, I'd even argue maybe some medium complexity, you'd be surprised what your business folks are going to be able to pick up and do, especially folks who are more native to these technologies that are entering the workforce, or just in general, just a natural on these tools, right? Because that could be anyone in any function that picks it up and says, man, I have a knack for this and wants to do more. And you'd be surprised. I've seen some folks who are non-technical do some very complex things. Granted, there's obviously, think of those are like your old master black belts that came out of the business areas. Like these, they pick it up and they run. So I think skilling, but I also think skilling for the organization, have a plan for it, work it into your academy or your learning and development teams. I think that's going to be really, really essential as we move forward, and think outside the box. It may be non-traditional backgrounds that are going to be those individuals that embrace it and are your change agents moving forward. So I think the way you do skill and culture and people is a huge factor. I think also think of ways to go grassroots. So you definitely want to still target strategy, top level. You don't want to miss that. But that's the one I think most people naturally gravitate toward. Let me give you just one more example. So because I've talked about gamification, I've talked about how we go out, we do hackathons and enablement events. We're even, let's say, drinking our own champagne because I think it sounds more appealing than the dog food example. But here at Cognizant, we also do something called Blue Bolt. We're out there gathering ideas from those on the ground, working with clients. And, because they're out there and they're asked to do work, right? Like we're signed up to fix a problem. Like we're working on a pharmacovigilance process, for example. But when you're hands-on like that, you get so many ideas. And yes, we could just bring them up to the clients, which we do, but we actually created a way to capture those ideas, share them across the organization, and then take that back to clients just to help them continue to see more and bigger results. But the other thing that's doing is helping us think bigger across these different clients, across portfolios. And I would even argue if you have that ability to kind of see the analogy between two different processes and teams, I would think it's very cool when you can learn something in a banking client that could be applied to like an energy client, for example, because there is some similarities, obviously different when you come to industry, but you're also going to find like, hey, you know what? This makes me think of a process I've seen. I wonder if we make a little bit of a change here and I apply it over this other process, maybe it would work, right? So I think it's just this whole ability to capture the knowledge of people that you work with every day that maybe just didn't know where to go to give their idea. And I don't know, you'll see a theme of what I talk about, and it's even my early lean days. I believe a lot in the power of the people. I think that people have ideas. I think people doing processes want to make them better. If someone's frustrated, something doesn't work, they would love the opportunity to go and actually fix it. And I continue to believe we are so ripe with how this technology is evolving to make all of that happen. And that's what I'm so excited about. So I kind of answered your question, Gabe, but then I went on a bit of a tangent to be.
No, but I love it. I love the energy. And I love the fact that without having to say, no, we're not replacing people, whatever, just naturally that's the thing, because everyone jobs in sort of process roles might not be the same, but it's not that the people are getting replaced. It's just like you literally are doing something else, something better, something more exciting, the collaboration, whatever it might be. And I think too, like this idea of this cross collaboration and thinking outside the box and those kinds of things also reminds me of, like, from a platform perspective, when you think about the technology that you're choosing for these things, you don't want to get sort of siloed, captive apps and agents that are just going to, let's be honest, everyone and their mother, my Bic pen is now AI powered, I would say. Like it's agentic probably, like everyone's got Gen AI, everyone's a Gen AI company. Now everyone's an agentic company. And some of those agents, let's just say not every agent is built the same. But it's not just the agent, it's the platform, right? Cool. Yeah. I can build an agent.
So you'll find out really quickly.
Governed in just, an email summarizer. Cool. That's not going to give you the step change impact that you're talking about.
Unless you've got a platform which is central to all of that, you're going to find you run out of road really quickly when it comes to automating the big things. And yeah, got a good question here. I'm eagerly waiting for a certification which trains and tests end-to-end on agentic automation. Is there any such certification in the pipeline, and when can we expect it to go live? Just to say, we've got quite a lot of resource available on the university right now. In particular, we've got a prompt engineering for automation developers that I think it's been live for a couple of months now, which you can get a badge on. We're also look out for the Delta training that we do with every quarterly release of the product as well. I struggle to keep up in terms of what's actually being released every quarter, but we've had updates to AI Agent Studio, enhancements to the AI skill. All of that is covered. There'll obviously be more coming in .35, which will be in a month or two's time. So I'll share those links with you, but keep an eye on that. And regarding the certification, I believe there will be plans for that. I don't have timelines, but for the time being, there's plenty of badges, plenty of content to consume. So yeah, our traditional developers can keep leveling up.
Awesome.
This is a good one for you, Ollie, that just popped up around how does someone switch from being an RPA developer to get really more hands-on with AI, Gen AI, agentic. I think this is this is a great question, by the way, because people constantly want to upskill, but maybe when you can help the LinkedIn user.
This whole thing from RPA to APA, basically, right?
Yeah.
And I think one thing I'd say with that as well is I think we're going to see them all merge together. I think with we'll be covering some of this during Pathfinder Summit, but some of those bots and those automations you've built, they're still going to be valuable. They're not going to disappear. The value that you've created will be able to be leveraged in much more different ways. So I think we'll start seeing pretty soon that we'll have agents calling those bots. Those agents will be aware that you've built a bot which can run reports in SAP or Oracle, and maybe you'll build an agent which can then actually classify and understand those reports. So you'll have a much more integrated platform and system with which to run the tools that you've already built. So I think going from an RPA developer to someone that can orchestrate an agentic platform will be a completely natural step. And all those skills that you've acquired in terms of being able to analyze processes and build to them will be super relevant in the new world.
And to answer the person's question too, I think so a couple of things. We have the Pathfinder Summit coming up next month, but I think if you go to Pathfinder community, there's any number of resources around agentic and around building AI agents that will, there's the recent bot game challenges as well that have tutorials. I think those are fantastic. Even for somebody like me, I can do those. And you get to kind of see it in action, if you will. It's not just sort of watching a demo of something else and then going back in. Like, makes it a little bit fun. But you talked about gamification, Marisa. The bot games are obviously hugely popular, but also very practical. And if we go back and look at the quotes and the comments on something like that, where people are like, "Oh, this gave me a new idea." People sharing their solutions and how they went about it. So for the audience member that posted, I'm sorry, I didn't see the name. I would recommend going to community straight away, and there's a ton of resources there. And then, as Ollie mentioned, I think the actual certification on agentic process automation either will be implemented and incorporated into the master certification, or could be a standalone. But there's plenty to be had right now. Don't wait for anything. Get going.
I think the other thing I would say is, go online, look up. There's so many videos out there. There's free trainings you can take. I even would say, so if you're a developer, you definitely want to think about kind of the what's next on how these tools. I would even also take a look into some of the analytics tools that are out there, because you will see a nice coupling that comes in with all of this with analytics, not only the data foundation, but how do you get to the metrics, KPIs like we were talking about. And then I think the other thing for leaders out there and managers, I would say, think about how to tier the training. At the top of the house, you should still be learning about Gen AI, agentic, taking courses. How do leaders use it? How do you impact with teams? The whole way down to folks entering as new joiners to your organization. We have done that at Cognizant. We've actually made sure all of our executive leadership have been trained on these different tools and technologies they come in. And those companies I see that are taking the time to think about how to incorporate it at every single level are seeing more success, more adoption. And also you're taking away some of the fear is just the unknown. that
Mhm.
comes with these tools. And if you can raise that awareness, it just makes it that much more easy, that much more impactful. And then you also start thinking about, how do I use it in the right place? Because as you use all these tools and technologies, it's not just about how do you get something agentic, how do I get a bot, how do I get a dashboard? It's actually about how you bring all this stuff together to drive the outcomes. Because you'll find it's very rare one tool solves all problems. And I'd even say, even think about other tools in your toolbox, like Agile, Lean Six Sigma, like all of that stuff that we all know and we're aware of. Think about which pieces of each one of those work to help you get the outcome that you want to get to. Because when it comes together, I always find that you tend to get more of the result. I'm not typically a purist in anything. I like to think about what all is in my toolkit and pull out the hammer when I need it and screwdriver when I need it. And I don't know, I'm clearly not maybe that handy with a toolbox because I'm running.
Those are the only tools I have in my toolbox too. It's fine. My wife doesn't let me touch anything in the house because I break stuff.
Is it scissors? Does that count?
I have the rounded ones, the little plastic ones.
Okay, yeah.
For good reason. One of these days we'll have my wife on one of these live streams, and boy, oh boy, no. So much good stuff, and there's so much further to so much more to dive into. But we're at the top of the hour. So Marisa, congratulations on making the top 10 list and the cover. We appreciate you stopping by during your press junket to spend some time with us. And of course, for dropping knowledge like you always do. I wanted, Ollie, there's so much more I want to dive into. Maybe we can come back with you, Marisa, on this topic, on sort of the technical side. At the beginning, we talked about technical debt and whatnot. Well, the reality is, like, no one's going to go replace their billions of dollars of investment in IT and infrastructure and, you know, systems that they've hard coded that don't have APIs and all these things that do custom things within these complex enterprises. And so those are the problems that we're solving, these mission critical problems. And so while there are some fun use cases like email summary or something like that, when it comes to mission critical, when it absolutely has to be done right, these are the things I want to dive into more. So hopefully we can come back and do that again. And again, Ollie, cheers to you, by the way, for picking up on the shameless plug vibe, like just like a natural, like it wasn't forced.
You just need to watch one of these episodes to know how it works. So yeah,
I'll take it as a compliment. I take pride in my shameless plugs. So again, thanks so much to the two of you. Happy holidays. To our audience, please feel free to connect with us via LinkedIn. Comment here in the event comment section on the page, and we'll do our best to get back to you. But we're always here to help. And thank you guys for sharing your time and sharing your knowledge. We'll talk to you soon. Everyone have a great holiday season. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.